World War II. 70 million soldiers fought. The youngest was just 6 years old. While most kids were learning to tie their shoes, Sergey Aleshkov was tying up Nazis. This is the unbelievable true story of the kindergartner who traded crayons for grenades and nap time for combat. A kindergartner's worst day ever. 1934, Russia. While most babies were busy drooling and crying, little Sergey Aleshkov was born in the village of Grin, blissfully unaware he'd soon be trading his rattle for a rifle. Fast forward to June 1941. Hitler, deciding Europe wasn't enough of a playground, launched Operation Barbarossa. 3 million Nazi troops stormed into the Soviet Union because apparently there's no party like a World War party. By 1942, Sergey was a strapping 6-year-old, mastering the art of chasing chickens and helping mom in the garden. Little did he know, his idyllic childhood was about to go up in flames, literally. One fine day, he was out picking berries when the sky filled with German planes. Seems the Luftwaffe thought Grin needed some redecorating. Bombs rained down, and in minutes, his world turned into a Michael Bay movie, minus the robots. As Nazi soldiers rounded up villagers, Sergey watched his mother and older brothers get shot. Talk about childhood trauma. He did what any sensible 6-year-old would do. He ran into the forest faster than you can say, worst hide-and-seek game ever. For days, he wandered alone in the wilderness, surviving on berries and raw mushrooms. At night, he curled up in hollow logs, probably wishing he'd paid more attention during Boy Scout meetings. Meanwhile, the Eastern Front was having a bad hair day. The Red Army was in full retreat, with over 3 million Soviet soldiers dead or captured. Things were looking grimmer than a grim fairy tale for the USSR. But Sergey's luck was about to change. A unit of Soviet scouts stumbled upon the dirty, starving boy. They were shocked to find a kid alone in the war zone. Clearly, they'd never been to a Walmart on Black Friday. The world's tiniest refugee, 1942, Western Russia. While the Wehrmacht steamrolled through Soviet territory, a pint-sized survivor was about to change the course of his own war. Sergey Aleshkov, our 6-year-old hero, had been wandering the wilderness for weeks. His village? Ashes. His family? Gone. His new best friend? A stick he'd named Boris. The Soviet countryside had become a deadly game of hide-and-seek. Nazi patrols combed the forests, and he played the champion hider. His size, usually a disadvantage, now kept him alive. He could squeeze into spaces adults couldn't dream of. His stomach became his worst enemy. Constant hunger pangs threatened to give away his position. He learned to eat silently, mastering the art of the noiseless nibble. Squirrels watched in envy as he outforaged them. One day, exhausted and delirious, Sergey heard voices, Russian voices. He'd stumbled upon a Soviet camp, specifically the 142nd Guards Regiment. The soldiers gaped at the filthy, twig-thin boy who'd materialized from the forest. Major Mikhail Vorobyev approached. "Where are you from, little one?" he asked. Sergey, summoning all his remaining strength, replied, "I'm from the war, sir. Same as you." The regiment faced a dilemma. Regulations said to send the boy to an orphanage, but in the chaos of war, paperwork had a funny way of disappearing. They decided to keep him. His first hot meal in weeks nearly made him cry. As the soldiers cleaned him up, they discovered a tough-as-nails kid under all that dirt. This wasn't just some lost boy. This was a survivor. The men began to see Sergey as a good luck charm. If this kid could survive alone in Nazi-occupied territory, surely their luck was about to change. They didn't know how right they were. As the little boy settled into military life, the 142nd prepared to move out. Their destination? A little-known city on the Volga River called Stalingrad. The boy who'd lost everything was about to witness history and play a surprising role in it. Boot camp for beginners and bedwetters. 1942, somewhere near the Volga River. While most kids were learning their ABCs, Sergey Aleshkov was getting a crash course in AK-47S. Welcome to the world's most unorthodox kindergarten. The 142nd Guards Regiment decided if they were keeping Sergey, they might as well make him useful. First lesson? Marching. Turns out, keeping pace is tricky when your legs are shorter than everyone else's rifle. Sergey's solution? 2 steps for every one of theirs. The result looked less like marching and more like an enthusiastic jog. Next up, camouflage training. The boy excelled here, thanks to his recent forest-dwelling experience. He could disappear faster than vodka at a Russian wedding. The soldiers joked they should parachute him behind enemy lines. The Germans would never see him coming. Firearms training was interesting. The recoil from a standard-issue rifle could send him flying backwards like a cartoon character. So, they started him on a smaller weapon, a slingshot. His accuracy was impressive. Turns out, all those days flicking berries at squirrels paid off. But it wasn't all fun and war games. Sergey had nightmares. He'd wake up crying, the horrors of his past still fresh. Major Vorobyev, who'd unofficially adopted Sergey, would comfort him. Nothing says father-son bonding like huddling in a trench at 3 a.m. The regiment's medic, Dr. Grigory Kuznetsov, took special interest in Sergey's well-being. He made sure the boy ate properly and got enough rest. "We can't have our secret weapon running on empty," he'd say with a wink. As weeks passed, the boy's presence began to change the regiment. Hardened soldiers softened around him. They taught him to read using military manuals and shared their rations. One soldier even knitted him a tiny uniform sweater. But war waits for no one, not even a 6-year-old Mascot. As summer turned to fall, the 142nd received new orders. They were to reinforce the defenses of a city under siege, Stalingrad. As they packed up camp, Sergey helped in his own way, mainly by getting underfoot and asking a million questions. The soldiers didn't mind. They knew that where they were going, laughter would be in short supply. Little did they know, their pint-sized comrade was about to make history in the most brutal battle of World War II. Stalingrad was waiting, and Sergey Oleshkov was ready to prove that size doesn't always matter in war. Sergey's first battle, Operation Sandbox, September 1942, Stalingrad. The 142nd Guards Regiment arrived at a city that looked more like a smoking pile of rubble than the industrial powerhouse it once was. For Sergey, it was like walking into a nightmare. Only this time he couldn't wake up. The regiment was assigned to defend a key factory complex. Their commander, eyeing Sergey skeptically, barked, "What's our littlest comrade going to do? Bore the Germans to death with nursery rhymes?" Major Vorobyev stepped in. "He's our messenger, sir. Small target, fast runner." And just like that, he had his first official war duty. He'd carry messages between positions when radio silence was necessary. The soldiers joked it was like a deadly game of telephone. Sergey's first day on the job came sooner than expected. German forces launched a surprise attack on their sector. As bullets whizzed overhead and mortars shook the ground, he clutched his first message, eyes wide with terror. "Go, Sergey!" Vorobyev shouted. "Remember your training!" "Training? You mean the 3 weeks of playing soldier? Great!" Heart pounding, he took off. He zigzagged through the ruins, diving for cover when explosions got too close. His small size, once a disadvantage, now kept him alive. He could squeeze through gaps in rubble that would stop a grown man. Halfway to his destination, disaster struck. A German sniper spotted him. Bullets kicked up dust at Sergey's heels. In a panic, he tripped and fell into a bomb crater. The sniper, thinking he'd hit his target, turned his attention elsewhere. He lay there, trembling, certain he'd wet himself. But the message was still clutched in his hand. He had a job to do. Covered in mud and possibly other things, he delivered the message. The officer read it, eyes widening. "My God, you've saved us all, boy!" The message warned of an imminent flanking maneuver. Thanks to Sergey's delivery, they repositioned just in time to repel the attack. As night fell and the fighting lulled, word of his act spread through the regiment. Soldiers ruffled his hair, calling him a hero. Sergey, exhausted and still a bit in shock, just wanted his teddy bear. That night, as he curled up in a makeshift bunker, Major Vorobyev sat beside him. "You did well today, son," he said softly, "but war is no place for a child. Tomorrow, we'll try to evacuate you." Sergey looked up, his eyes suddenly fierce. "No," he said, "I'm a soldier now. This is my home." Vorobyev sighed. The Battle of Stalingrad had only just begun, and their littlest soldier was growing up far too fast. The Stalingrad shenanigans. October 1942. Stalingrad had become a meat grinder, chewing up soldiers and spitting out horror. But amidst the carnage, Sergey Oleshkov was about to prove that sometimes the smallest soldiers can make the biggest impact. The 142nd's position was under constant bombardment. Food was scarce, ammunition scarcer. One day, he overheard officers discussing a critical ammunition shortage. That's when his size became an unexpected asset. Sergey proposed a daring plan. He could crawl through the narrow rubble passages to reach an abandoned Soviet supply depot behind enemy lines. The officers were skeptical, but desperate times call for desperate measures. Under the cover of the night, he set out. Armed with only a small pistol and a bag, he navigated the urban wasteland. He dodged German patrols, slipping past like a ghost. One close call had him hiding in a bombed-out bathtub as Nazi boots marched by, inches away. Reaching the depot, Sergey found a treasure trove of ammo and medical supplies. He stuffed his bag full, but realized he couldn't carry it all back. That's when he had an idea that would make MacGyver proud. Using debris and some rope, the boy fashioned a small sled. He loaded it with supplies and began the treacherous journey back. Pulling the sled through ruins, he looked like a war-torn Santa Claus. Halfway back, disaster struck. A German patrol spotted him. Bullets whizzed by as Sergey ducked for cover, his precious cargo still exposed. In a moment of quick thinking, he unloaded a box of grenades and started lobbing them wildly. The resulting explosions caused mass confusion among the Germans. In the chaos, Sergey slipped away, sled in tow. He returned to Soviet lines a hero, his makeshift sleigh delivering a Christmas miracle in October. The 142nd celebrated their pint-sized savior. His exploit boosted morale and gave them a fighting chance. It also earned him a new nickname, the Stalingrad Santa. But war has no time for celebrations. As Sergey basked in his success, the Germans were preparing their biggest push yet. The 142nd would soon face its toughest test, and their littlest soldier would be right in the thick of it. That night, as shells illuminated the sky like a macabre fireworks display, Sergey looked out over the ruined city. He was no longer just a mascot or a messenger. He was a soldier of Stalingrad, ready to defend his new home to the last. The infamous bunker incident, November 1942. Stalingrad had become a frozen hell. The Volga River was icing over, cutting off Soviet supplies. For the 142nd Guards Regiment, things were about to go from bad to worse. The Germans launched a massive assault, targeting the factory complex the 142nd defended. Sergey and Major Vorobyev found themselves trapped in a command bunker with a handful of soldiers. Outside, panzer tanks rumbled closer. Inside the bunker, tensions ran high. Food and ammo were low. The radio crackled with desperate pleas for help from other units. Major Vorobyev tried to coordinate a defense, but it was clear they were being overwhelmed. That's when Sergey noticed something the adults had missed, a small air vent, barely visible behind some crates. It was too small for a grown man, but for a scrawny 6-year-old. "I can fit through there," he announced. The soldiers looked at him like he'd grown a second head. But Vorobyev saw the determination in the boy's eyes. "It's too dangerous," Vorobyev argued. But Sergey stood his ground. "If I don't go, we all die here." With reluctance, Vorobyev agreed. They gave him a message detailing their situation and location. As he squeezed into the vent, Vorobyev whispered, "Come back alive, son." Sergey crawled through pitch-black tunnels, his heart pounding louder than the explosions outside. Rats scurried past him. At one point, the vent narrowed so much he thought he'd get stuck, but he pressed on, driven by a courage that belied his years. After what felt like hours, Sergey emerged into the ruins. He was behind German lines. Using every trick he'd learned, he navigated the battlefield. He dodged patrols, used burning tanks as cover, and at one point played dead among actual corpses as German soldiers walked by. Finally, he reached a Soviet position. The soldiers were shocked to see a filthy child emerge from the smoke. But when they read the message, they sprang into action. Thanks to Sergey's intel, a relief force broke through to the trapped 142nd. They arrived just as the Germans were about to overrun the bunker. The sight of Soviet reinforcements sent the attackers into retreat. As the dust settled, he reunited with a relieved Major Vorobyev. The hardened soldier hugged the boy tightly, not caring who saw his tears. Word of a little boy's bravery spread quickly. Even the Soviet high command took notice. Talks of a medal began to circulate. Sergey's Medal of Valor for bravery or cuteness. December 1942. As winter tightened its icy grip on Stalingrad, something unprecedented was happening. The Soviet High Command had decided to award a medal to a 6-year-old. News of Sergey's heroics had traveled up the chain of command, leaving officers scratching their heads. The bunker incident had saved an entire company, but how do you pin a medal on a kid who can barely see over a desk? The award ceremony was a sight to behold. Sergey stood at attention, his oversized uniform making him look like a puppy wearing a circus tent. The medal they pinned on his chest was almost as big as he was. General Rodimtsev, commander of the 13th Guards Rifle Division, presented the award. As he bent down to pin the medal, he muttered, "I've given out hundreds of these, but never to someone who still believes in Santa." Sergey beamed with pride, even though he could barely pronounce the name of his medal, for battle merit. Some soldiers joked it should be renamed for battlefield babysitting. The ceremony wasn't without its hiccups. When asked to give a speech, Sergey simply said, "Can I have more chocolate now?" Turns out, they'd bribed him with sweets to stand still during the ceremony. But the mood shifted when a journalist asked Sergey why he risked his life. The boy's answer silenced the room. "Because they killed my mama, and my brothers, and everyone. So I fight." Suddenly, the absurdity of a child soldier faded. The hardened veteran saw the boy not as a mascot, but as a comrade who'd lost as much as any of them. The medal changed things for Sergey. Some officers wanted to pull him off the front lines, arguing he was too valuable for propaganda. Others insisted his good luck was needed in battle. Sergey had his own ideas. That night, he snuck into the armory and tried to requisition a rifle. The quartermaster found him struggling to lift a Mosin Nagant nearly twice his size. "What are you doing, little one?" the quartermaster asked. "I have a medal now," he replied seriously. "That means I'm a real soldier. Real soldiers have rifles." The quartermaster chuckled and handed him a wooden training rifle instead. "Practice with this first. You'll grow into the real thing soon enough." As Sergey marched off, proudly carrying his wooden gun, the quartermaster's smile faded. In the distance, artillery lit up the night sky. The Battle of Stalingrad was far from over, and its youngest soldier was growing up far too fast. The final push, Operation Nap Time, January 1943. Stalingrad was a frozen wasteland of destruction, but the tide was turning. The Soviets had launched Operation Uranus, encircling the German 6th Army. Now it was time for the final push. The 142nd Guards Regiment was tasked with clearing out a heavily fortified German position. The problem? It was in a former kindergarten. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Sergey. The assault was brutal. German machine guns turned the approaching Soviet forces into Swiss cheese. That's when Sergey had an idea so crazy, it just might work. "I know that building," he told Major Vorobyev. "There's a secret tunnel the teachers used to smoke. It leads right inside." Vorobyev was skeptical, but desperate times call for desperate measures. He authorized a small team, with the little boy as the guide, to infiltrate through the tunnel. As they crawled through the cramped passage, Sergey hummed a lullaby. "What are you doing?" a soldier whispered. "Getting into character," he replied with a grin. They emerged in the kindergarten's basement. The Germans, focused on the frontal assault, never saw them coming. Sergey led the team through the building he once knew as a student. In a surreal moment, Sergey found himself in his old classroom. Crayon drawings still hung on the walls, now riddled with bullet holes. A teddy bear lay in the corner, missing an eye. The Soviet team caught the Germans completely off guard. In the chaos, Sergey's size became an advantage. He darted between legs, tripping soldiers and causing confusion. At one point, a German officer cornered Sergey. The boy's eyes darted around, landing on a familiar object. He grabbed a wooden block from a toy box and hurled it at the officer's head with surprising accuracy. The man went down, probably wondering if he'd just been defeated by a toddler. Within an hour, the kindergarten was secured. The 142nd poured in, using it as a base to push deeper into German territory. As the dust settled, Sergey stood in the playground, his old swing set now a twisted metal skeleton. A soldier approached, handing him a cup of hot tea. "You did good, kid," he said, "but let's hope your next school has less gunfire and more nap time." Sergey nodded, sipping his tea. He'd started this war as a scared little boy. Now, he felt different, older, tougher. As he watched more Soviet troops march past, he realized the end was in sight. Stalingrad would hold, and he had played his part. February 2nd, 1943. The Battle of Stalingrad was finally over. The once mighty German 6th Army had surrendered, and the Soviet flag flew over the ruins of the city. For Sergey Oleshkov, it felt like waking up from a long, terrible nightmare. As the 142nd Guards Regiment celebrated, Sergey found himself the center of attention. Soldiers hoisted him on their shoulders, parading him around like a trophy. "The littlest hero of Stalingrad," they cheered. Amidst the jubilation, a journalist approached him. "Young man, how does it feel to be the youngest soldier in the greatest victory of the war?" He thought for a moment, then replied, "I'm hungry. Is there any cake?" The littlest soldier grows up. 1945, the war was over, and Sergey Oleshkov, now 9, found himself facing his toughest challenge yet: peace. Major Vorobyev, true to his word, shipped him off to the Tula Suvorov Military School. Imagine Hogwarts, but instead of wands, they had rifles, and instead of Quidditch, they had drill practice. His first day was a riot. When asked about his previous education, he deadpanned. "I majored in survival, with a minor in dodging bullets." The instructor wasn't amused, but the other kids thought it was hilarious. At Suvorov, Sergey finally got to experience normal kid stuff. Well, as normal as you can get in a military school. He had pillow fights that didn't end in actual fights, and for once, explosions were just in chemistry class, not on the battlefield. His 4 Battle Merit Medal caused quite a stir. During show and tell, one kid brought in his dad's war medal. Sergey casually dropped his own on the table. "Beat that," he smirked. The teacher fainted. His unique war experience came in handy sometimes. During history class, when the teacher was droning on about Stalingrad, Sergey raised his hand. "Actually, sir, that's not quite how it happened." The poor teacher spent the rest of the year fact-checking everything against the gospel according to Sergey. As the years rolled by, Sergey grew taller, but his reputation as the Stalingrad kid never shrank. He graduated from Suvorov and joined the Soviet military. Turns out, old habits die hard. Sergey Aleshkov lived to the ripe old age of 54, passing away in 1990. His last words were reportedly, "Well, I outlived Hitler by quite a margin, didn't I?" Classic Sergey, always keeping score. Many children had to be really resourceful at an early age, be it to live, to be smart, or just because. But sometimes, these children become so resourceful, bullies are not their main enemies anymore, but a battalion of soldiers. Then these soldiers call them child agents, appropriately so. Throughout history, there were a lot of them. Here are some. Alexander the Great. In 338 BC, when Philip sent his army to fight the allied forces of Athens and Thebes at the Battle of Chaeronea, Alexander was only 16. Philip handed him the command of the entire left wing of the Macedonian army. Not a bodyguard squad, not a ceremonial role. A teenager was out there running an entire wing during a full-scale war with some of the most dangerous soldiers Greece could throw at them. Athens brought thousands. Thebes had its sacred band, a supposedly unbeatable unit made up of 150 pairs of male lovers trained to fight to the death. Alexander started by watching Philip bait the Athenian lines into charging too fast. Once they took the bait, Alexander moved. He led the companion cavalry straight into the Theban right, where the sacred band stood. Nobody expected a teenage commander to touch that elite group. Most generals didn't want to go near them. Alexander drove his cavalry into the thickest part of the fight and smashed directly into the sacred band's formation. Philip handled the Athenians by pulling back and circling them. But Alexander's part of the battle wasn't about maneuvering. He hit them hard. Most of the sacred band stayed in formation and fought back. They were crushed. Macedonian forces killed nearly every last one of them. Out of 300 men, around 254 died right there. The rest were surrounded and executed. Alexander didn't give any of them a chance to retreat. The whole right side of the enemy collapsed. The battle ended in a total Macedonian victory. Philip ordered the dead sacred band buried on the field, and the mound became a monument for the next 1,000 years. But Alexander didn't wait for monuments. After that battle, Philip put him in charge of diplomatic missions and military planning. This was the same Alexander who would later crush Persia, take Egypt, sack cities across Asia, and march into India. But none of that would have happened if he hadn't proved himself at Chaeronea. His first major command was during one of the most important battles in Greek history. Joan of Arc. Well, you didn't expect that for sure. But if you expected it, you're great. Joan of Arc was born into a regular peasant family in Domremy, France, in 1412. By the time she hit her mid-teens, France was getting stomped by the English in the 100 Years' War. The French monarchy was barely hanging on. The Dauphin Charles was hiding out in the south, and English troops were marching all over France like they owned it. And then this teenage girl from a farm straight up walked in saying God told her to save France. She legit said that. She managed to convince the Dauphin's court to give her troops, and even the skeptical nobles eventually backed off once they realized this girl could rally men who'd practically given up. In 1429, at just 17, she marched to Orleans. That city had been under siege for months. Most commanders were too scared or lazy to try anything bold. Joan showed up in armor, riding a horse, waving a banner. She charged into battle, got hit by an arrow, and still came back to lead another assault. The French soldiers, who'd been down in the dumps for years, suddenly started winning. They broke the siege in under 2 weeks. That wasn't supposed to happen. English troops started panicking, and French morale shot through the roof. City after city started falling back into French hands, and the Dauphin finally grew a spine and rode off to Reims for his coronation. Joan was right there at his side, in full armor, during the ceremony. She'd literally dragged him from exile to a throne, but that didn't last. The French court, especially the nobles who didn't like taking orders from a farm girl, started pulling back their support. Meanwhile, she kept fighting, and eventually got captured by Burgundian forces, who were basically French traitors that worked with the English. The English put her on trial in 1431. Not for war stuff. They went with heresy, cross-dressing, and talking to saints. The trial was a complete joke. Biased judges, bogus charges, zero fairness. She stood her ground through the whole circus, even while locked in a cage, starved, and threatened with torture. Eventually, they burned her alive in Rouen. She was 19. Giovanni Balilla Parasso. In December 1746, Austrian troops occupied Genoa after the city had initially surrendered earlier that year. The Habsburgs rolled in thinking it'd be a clean sweep. They locked down the city, treated the locals like unpaid labor, and made a habit of humiliating them. One day, the Austrians needed to move a cannon. Instead of handling it themselves, they ordered a group of Genoese civilians to do it. That's where Giovanni came in. He was a local kid, about 10 or 11 years old. People called him Balilla, which means little boy. It could be Old Italian for all I know, but the last time I checked, little boy in Italian is bambino. But let me know in the comments where I got myself lost in the translation. Going back, he was watching this go down, saw the soldiers barking at the townsfolk to move their heavy cannon, and something in him snapped. Giovanni picked up a rock, chucked it at one of the Austrian officers, and hit him square. The guy went down, chaos broke out, and the crowd suddenly found a reason to stop being submissive. Giovanni's rock turned into a riot in a matter of minutes. Civilians grabbed whatever they could, sticks, tools, literally anything, and they started chucking them all to the Austrians. Street by street, they fought off trained soldiers with whatever they had lying around. The Habsburgs were not ready for this kind of street-level brawl from civilians led by some angry kid. Word spread fast. Other parts of Genoa picked up on the fight and joined in. The Austrians tried to regroup, but they couldn't get control back. The locals were everywhere, setting up barricades, ambushing patrols, cutting off supply lines. The uprising kept going for several days. Eventually, it pushed the Austrian troops out of Genoa. All Giovanni did was throw a rock, but that rock made him a good agent of chaos for the sake of peace. Momcilo Gavrić. Momcilo was 8 years old back in 1914, living in a small Serbian village when Austro-Hungarian troops rolled in and wiped his family out of existence. Not one or two, the whole family. Momcilo survived that, only to get handed a rifle-sized reality check. He was taken in by the 6th Artillery Division of the Serbian Army. They gave him a uniform, stuck him with the artillery crew, and turned him into a scout and messenger, in the middle of a war zone, with zero hesitation. He was running through enemy lines, reporting enemy positions. The Battle of Sur? That was the first major Allied victory of World War I, and guess who helped point out enemy placements? That 8-year-old with nothing to lose. Serbia promoted him to corporal for it. Corporal. At 8. And it didn't stop there. Momcilo didn't get sent to the rear, or used for some propaganda shot. He stayed with the unit, trained with them, slept in the mud with them, got shot at with them. He walked across the Albanian mountains with them during the Great Retreat in 1915. That march chewed up experienced men like gum, but the kid made it to the other side. He got a medal for it, too. Not a sticker, a real military decoration. The guy eventually ended up in France for military education. Serbia actually sent him there to get trained properly. So, on top of being a child soldier, he got formal schooling in warfare before puberty. Meanwhile, most kids that age can't figure out a locker combination. After the war, he kept his mouth shut and lived a quiet life, never bragged, never tried to cash in. He worked normal jobs, raised a family, and didn't talk about how he'd been promoted in the Serbian army before most kids even start school. Michel Chikwanin. In 1993, in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, Michel was just playing soccer or football with his friends like any normal day when a group of rebels ambushed the area, surrounded them, and grabbed Michel along with several others. No one else stepped in as the militia had full control over the village, and everyone knew resisting them wasn't an option. After the abduction, Michel and the others were dragged deep into the forest. The militia didn't wait long to start the so-called initiation. Michel was one of the shortest there, but that wasn't an issue with the rebels. They tied a blindfold around his head and shoved an AK-47 into his hands. He didn't even know how to shoot. One of the older rebels stood behind him, held his arms, and positioned the gun. Then they told him to pull the trigger. He hesitated, but they forced him. He fired. When they finally took the blindfold off, Michel saw the body of his best friend Kevin in front of him. The entire point was to destroy any sense of connection, innocence, or fear. It was deliberate. They used Kevin's death to numb Michel emotionally and break him quickly. After that, Michel stayed with the rebels. They kept him, fed him lies about why he had to do what he did, and trained him for combat. He was one of many that were used for patrols, carrying weapons, and taking part in raids. He had no way of escaping right away. The jungle was huge and unknown, and the rebels constantly threatened anyone who tried to run. Michel eventually found an opportunity when a group managed to flee during a raid. He joined them and ran. They moved through the forest for days before reaching a village outside the rebels' territory. From there, he was able to return to his family. By some miracle, they were still alive and had been searching for him. His father, who was a human rights activist, knew how bad the situation had become and helped the family leave the country. Years later, Michel and his family moved to Canada as refugees. He was a teenager when they finally settled there. He tried to go back to a normal life, albeit his was cut up and rewritten by a war he didn't ask for. He didn't talk about the past for a long time. Eventually, though, he began speaking publicly about what happened. Mamuka Mamulashvili. Mamuka was born in 1978 in Georgia. In 1992, when the war in Abkhazia broke out, he was 14. The war was one of the bloodiest episodes of the post-Soviet collapse. It was fought between the ethnic Georgians loyal to the new independent Georgian government and Abkhaz separatists backed by Russian elements. Mamuka was still a school kid when his father, a military officer, brought him into the battlefield. His father was part of the Georgian forces trying to hold on to Abkhazia. Mamuka stayed by his father's side, moving across villages and cities that had turned into war zones. By 1993, Mamuka was in full combat gear, carrying a weapon, crossing trenches, dodging sniper fire, and watching his own people either fall or disappear. He was assigned no real formal rank, but he was treated as part of the armed group. Most of his combat experience came from being embedded with older soldiers, especially his father's direct unit, which operated in western Georgia near the front lines. Mamuka didn't attend school after joining the unit. His education stopped once he stepped into the war, and by the end of that year, he had already been through firefights, bombings, and multiple near-death situations. That same year, Mamuka was captured by Abkhaz separatist forces. He was separated from his father during one of the engagements and taken into custody. For 3 months, he was held as a prisoner of war. His captors knew he was a kid, but that didn't matter. Mamuka wasn't treated as a civilian. He was interrogated, moved between makeshift prisons, and kept in cells with grown men. By the end of 1993, the Georgian side had lost control of most of Abkhazia. More than 200,000 ethnic Georgians were displaced. Some were killed, some were deported. Mamuka was pulled out of the region as the Georgian side retreated. The war had ended for him by the time he turned 15. His time as a child combatant lasted about a year and a half. But in that short period, he had already seen more combat than most career soldiers. After the war, Mamuka didn't leave the military path. He took up formal training in the years that followed and rejoined Georgia's armed forces as an adult. By the 2000s, he was part of several defense initiatives. He trained in foreign programs, learned English, and worked with Western units during peacekeeping missions. Robert Yummy Sandifer. In August 1994, Robert was already a walking headline waiting to happen. He was just barely tall enough to see over a car dashboard, but knee-deep in gang life. Robert got the nickname Yummy because he loved candy, but candy was not what he brought with him when he ran around. He was running with the Black Disciples, one of the biggest gangs in Chicago, and they handed him a 9mm. The plan was stupid and violent, which is pretty much how these things go. Robert was told to do a drive-by shooting to impress the older guys and scare off some rival gang members. Problem was, Robert had the aim of someone who had no training and a lot of nerves. He pulled the trigger and sprayed bullets. He hit a few people, and one Siobhan Dean was caught up in this despite not being the target. She was just walking near her house when her life got cut short because Robert couldn't aim and some older gang members thought using him would mean less heat. After that, the city lost its mind. Cops went on full manhunt mode. Reporters camped out in neighborhoods they normally avoided, and Robert vanished like he'd dropped off the planet. The thing is, he didn't run off with some master plan. He hid in basements, bounced between houses, ate junk food, and waited. That's all someone like Robert really knows how to do when the world starts collapsing. The national media started flashing his mugshot. Meanwhile, the Black Disciples started panicking. Robert was now a problem. He was loud, unpredictable, and way too famous for their taste. They needed him gone. So they told 2 of their members, Derek and Craig, to take care of it. That meant drive him around, act like they were helping, and then pew pew pew. Robert was found face down in a puddle eventually, still wearing the same clothes from when he went on the run. Seydou Kargbo. In the 1990s, Sierra Leone's civil war gave the world one of the youngest and most brutal soldiers it had ever seen. Seydou Kargbo was 9 when rebels from the Revolutionary United Front took him. They didn't waste time doing that and was successful to quote-unquote recruit him. By age 11, they started calling him Corporal Highway, not because he earned stripes or saluted properly, but because he guarded rural checkpoints and sent anyone who pissed him off into oblivion. If you didn't have an ID, for example, Corporal Highway would have butterflied you. He was the kind of kid who'd grab your arm, pin you to the dirt, and then whack, whack, whack. Or, for a more befitting sound effect, slice, slice, slice. Then he'd show you how he did it step by step because he was so proud of it. That's exactly what he did when foreign journalists rolled up one day. He didn't flinch, didn't stutter. He just reenacted how he used to do what he did. RUF didn't need grown men when they had kids like him. They used the magic powder and some fire powder to keep Corporal Highway jacked up and numb to everything. They called it Brown Brown, and it fried whatever was left of his innocence. At one point, they put him in charge of the checkpoints between rebel camps and towns. That's where he got the nickname. Highway control was serious business. You were judge, jury, and executioner. If someone didn't look right, they didn't get to keep walking. Some got turned into Stretch Armstrong for fun. What made him worse than most adults was that nobody had to stand behind him yelling commands. He'd already figured out what to do. And what he did was crazy. When reporters asked him later what he thought about what he did, Seydou didn't really answer, but stared. Patrick Okaya. Patrick got dragged into Joseph Kony's cult circus during the very early part of his life. The Lord's Resistance Army snatched them from villages, shoved guns in their hands, and made sure they couldn't go back home, ever. Patrick got sucked into that. One day he was a kid. The next day he was in the bush, carrying an AK and taking orders from lunatics who thought God texted them military strategies. By the time he hit 13, Patrick had a rank, corporal, because that's what you get when you follow orders so well you stop flinching while doing what they told you to. Patrick said he used to ambush civilian cars. That's the kind of thing the LRA loved: pop out of the jungle, shoot out tires, and then send everyone who screamed to the Shadow Realm. Probably also steal whatever wasn't nailed down. Sometimes they dragged people out and tied them up. If someone in his group hesitated, Patrick would do things Patrick would do. The thing that turned Patrick into a tool for this death cult was the way they rewired him. The moment you're abducted, they order you to turn the switch of life of someone off, usually someone you know on purpose. Once that's done, you've got no way back, because if you tried to do so, they'll either give you to the cops or deal with you themselves. By 17, Patrick wasn't a kid anymore. He was 5 years deep in that life, with blood on his hands that no one could count. He'd been shot at, stabbed, probably starved, and somehow climbed the ranks without dying or escaping. Every time they sent him out, he came back a little more blank. Patrick eventually got out, or at least got away. But you don't get to quit the LRA clean. You just stop running missions and start talking to aid workers who look at you like a science project. He gave interviews years later, said he remembered everything, didn't flinch while telling it, didn't try to cry, didn't say sorry. Edgar Hernandez Lugo. Edgar was born in San Diego, California, in 1996. He held U.S. citizenship, but most of his childhood was spent in Mexico. By the time he turned 11, Edgar was already in the orbit of the South Pacific Cartel, a splinter group of the larger Beltran Leyva organization. He later said that cartel members got him and forced him into their ranks. They assigned him to work under the command of a local female cartel boss named Julieta. At first, Edgar worked as an errand boy, delivering packages and weapons. Then he became a lookout. Eventually, he got orders to carry out offings. The cartel recorded Edgar on video, and those clips were posted online. In one of the most well-known videos, Edgar stands with a group of masked cartel members next to a man that was tied to a chair. Edgar described everything that was about to happen, all while his older members were cheering him on. In the summer of 2010, the violence around Cuernavaca exploded. Cartel members were found in a state of permanent sleeping all across town, and law enforcement kept discovering bodies the more they drive and walk. Bridges, highways, a lot of places. In at least 4 of those incidents, Edgar was believed to be involved. Investigators linked him to multiple scenes, and authorities started hearing rumors about a child hitman working in the area. They didn't take it seriously until they got a video showing Edgar doing it. That clip kicked off a manhunt. The military took over the operation. They already had his nickname, El Ponchis, which meant the cloak. Nobody really knew where it came from. On the 2nd of December, 2010, Edgar was caught at the airport in Cuernavaca. He was with his sister, trying to board a flight to Tijuana. From there, they were planning to cross into San Diego. Soldiers arrested him without incident. He didn't resist. Officers said he looked calm, even blank. They took him into custody and interviewed him on camera. That footage was later leaked to the press. In the video, Edgar sits quietly, staring ahead while an officer off-screen asks him questions. When asked what he did for the cartel, Edgar answers, "Bleep, bleep, bleep," redacted for the reason that it was too graphic. He says it with no emotion. He also says he was forced to do it. He adds that he was under the influence of bleep, bleep, bleep and was under it since he was 11. Prosecutors didn't charge Edgar as an adult. Mexican law didn't allow it at the time. Instead, he went to juvenile court. During the hearings, psychologists reviewed his mental health and background. They found signs of trauma and manipulation. Court transcripts showed that Edgar's life at home had been unstable long before the cartel found him. His mother had left him with relatives, and those relatives lived close to cartel territory. He didn't go to school regularly and was often seen on the streets. No adult ever reported him missing. When asked why he didn't run away or tell anyone, Edgar said that he was scared. He said that the cartel threatened him if he didn't obey. The juvenile court sentenced Edgar to 3 years at a juvenile detention center in Morelos, the maximum time allowed for a minor under Mexican law. He served the sentence from 2010 to 2013. During his time there, he was placed under strict monitoring. He had counseling sessions, underwent rehabilitation, and was removed from all outside contact with former associates. His case drew massive media attention in both Mexico and the United States. Journalists called him the world's youngest hitman. Advocates and human rights groups debated whether he was a criminal or a victim. After he finished his sentence in 2013, Mexican authorities didn't release his exact whereabouts. They moved him to a secure location. Reports said he was given a new identity and transferred to the United States under protection. U.S. officials never confirmed this. He hasn't appeared publicly since. No child should ever be put in a situation where life and death are the stakes. Never ever. Sure, they could survive through it and become cold-blooded human beings in the future. But that's exactly why they shouldn't be in one in the first place. A child should feel happy, joy, excitement, and the likes, not deadpan, logical, and dense. See y'all.